Dr. Jimmy Beasley, good morning, good day, and thank you for taking the time to join me and to share your experiences, in particular, the value that you've offered, the gain you've had in your life around leadership on this episode of Leadership Synergized. So welcome, my friend.
I appreciate you having me on the show, Dr. Smith. It's it's kind of been a long time coming, I think, with us to reconnect on another level and kind of work through things. We have these conversations, every couple months. It seems like even when I was deployed overseas, it seems like there was always a time where something was going on and I'd get a text from you or something, and it just kind of brightens the day. So I'm excited for what we're going to do today.
Well, I appreciate that. And please, it's Kevin, always Kevin with you, my friend. And just for full transparency, for those watching and listening and a part of our audience, Dr. Beasley, Jimmy, and I have worked together in the educational field, in public education as building administrators. What a great teammate he was, and how much he has helped me has just been tremendous in my own growth in many ways from a leadership piece. But we also have worked at the higher ed aspect through your doctoral work and as an instructor at the college level at a private local college in the Southern Indiana area. Dr. Beasley, you alluded a bit to your background as well with the military piece, and we were just talking before we went on air about the whole well-rounded opportunities you've had to become a leader. Why don't you share a bit for the audience, those who may be listening in or watching and joining us, and tell everyone about yourself, a little bit about your background and all those diverse touch points you've had a chance to gain as a leader.
Yeah, so it's funny that we start off with this, and I think it's a great point to start off with. But I was just talking to the director that I work with in my current position the other day, and I think it goes you don't hear very often this way, especially in the corporate world or industry. But I feel like I do a lot of mentoring and helping the director that I work with, because she brought me on for my leadership ability as opposed to perhaps the field that I'm in. And we talked about what makes a leader, and it was a really intense conversation, and we talked and come to find, I'm like, I think the best of us and our leadership skills are kind of like a puzzle, where we take pieces of every good and bad. And I think the bad maybe sometimes are more prominent pieces, and then we build out who we are as a leader through those people that have impacted our lives. So to start off with that, I think that's a great segue into what we're going to talk about today in leadership and servant leadership, and then how growth has come about like that. Myself, I've got 20 years in the military. I did both enlisted and an officer side of things. I just hit 20 years, the 13th of this month, actually. So I am eligible for retirement. During that time, I've had many great leaders, and I've had poor leaders that have really impacted how and I think the biggest thing that the military provides you is structure and discipline. You come in and there's a set of standards that you have to follow, that kind of blend you into this disciplined leader. But with me in the educational field, you can't have that mentality that perhaps you have in the military. So you have to meld it into a relationship kind of thing, building experience, so that way the kids and others will work with you. So I had to learn really quickly how to translate the military mindset into the educational field, and I think it really has helped me just become a more well-rounded one, both in both sectors of education and in the military world. And then those two combined have really kind of melded me into what I am today in the corporate world, and allowed me to be successful in that regard as well. Because there are times that sometimes you got to push back a little bit, and sometimes that discipline and that structure is very well necessary for the corporate world. And then the relationship building, I think, is just always there. It always has to be present in in leadership, and if you want to be successful, I think building those relationships, and it's something that we talked about at ends, at when we were together working in the public school system, about building those relationships and becoming more successful. And it's the little things. I think I can remember one instance that we had at White River Valley where you and I did a skit to kind of prank the superintendent, and then we got the kids involved in it, and it became a big old thing that kids talked about for years to come. After you had gone on to bigger, better things, I had gone on to that kids reached out, and that do you remember that, where and then we pulled the mask off like a Scooby-Doo ending, and those are the things that really are impactful to people. And I think that's why you and I melded so well together, because you have that in spades, and people know that you're genuine and you care about people. And I think your ability to talk to people, and I think that's been a major puzzle piece that's fit into my leadership roles. Now, on the flip side of things, I think some of the experiences I've had, and why I feel like I've been successful in leadership, have come from bad leadership as well. I coached at the collegiate level, coached basketball at the collegiate level, and the individual that I coached with, he was a very good basketball coach. He had a very good basketball mind, but he would belittle and was very derogatory towards his assistant coaches. And I knew from that point on, I didn't want anybody underneath me to feel that way. So I took a big piece of that bad leadership to say how I wanted people to know when they worked with me that they were something important and special too, and that they were just as important, if not more important, than me, and that they were going to have their voice heard, and that they were going to be impacting people as much as I was. So I think, I feel like that the biggest strengths that I have are the ability to lead up and down, which is something that I think is overlooked. And then another one is to pull from both good and bad experiences, and then kind of mold them into growth for myself. And I think that growth mindset is key, and to always be looking for something to improve yourself with, and how that might be helpful for those you're trying to impact.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Beasley. And I think, when I reflect throughout my life and the people that have impacted me, your willingness and natural focus on serving, whether it's your family, with your children, your wife, your community, whether it's the country, the military, education, stands above all else. The area that I have learned most from you on. And with Leadership Synergized, the experience, as I look back now, nearing my mid-60s, things that used to be so fogged up that I didn't understand perhaps fully on why they occurred, or how the result ended up the way it was, or didn't end up the way I thought it might, are now more clear to me. And as I reflected, getting prepared to launch this video podcast and to bring people in to join me, is I wanted to honor and share the positive impacts people have had in my life, such as yourself. And that includes individuals whom I've never met, but have admired and have learned from. And, I know I'm not going to nail this quote just exactly right, but standing just about above all else was Coach John Wooden as a leader and his pyramid of success. But, when you read about Coach Wooden and you see in his heart, the one quote that stands out to me more than anything, and this is me paraphrasing it, and I apologize to Coach Wooden's legacy in this regard, but it really goes, that we don't always have to rush. Sometimes we just slow down and things will speed up on their own pace in that regard. And I know, again, that's not the proper quote, but that brings into, for me, this whole concept of still leadership, serving, transforming, inspiring, influencing, loving, and leading. And when I break that down into the acronyms, starting with the S and still, it's about serving others, but yet we also have to serve self. And for me, what I have found when teams I have been members of have succeeded, it's when we brought value to ourselves, brought value to the team, so we could create a greater value to offer others. And I think you represent that probably more than anything else of anyone I have met in my lifetime. And sometimes serving ourselves can become a challenge because we feel guilty, right? Because we're not putting time in for someone else. Or if we're faith-based individuals, maybe we feel like we're not serving our purpose in that piece, in that regard. But talk a bit about how you've been able to succeed, or where maybe you've overcome some obstacles in creating greater value for you so you can add greater value for others.
I think you said it best when you said, that's that you have to take into consideration that self piece of it as well. And I think servant leadership at its core is serving the needs of others. And in my life, I try to, I don't know that it was an intentional thing, that it just didn't come out the way it did, Kevin. I don't know that it just so happened that way. Like, I had this calling in my life to join the Army after I had completed high school and got into the college, and athletics were over, and I wanted something more to push myself. So I decided to join the Army, and I thought that was a good way to do that. So in that regard, I was looking for something more, and it ended up being serving my country. And then same things as I get into the college, and I had aspirations of going to law school, perhaps. I had toyed around with the ideas of different things, and then it kind of just got into the point where education made a lot of sense, and it's kind of the only thing I knew growing up. I didn't come from a wealthy family, so I kind of fell into education, and then when I got into that, I realized that I enjoyed doing that and impacting lives. So it was a way to, it happened to me, and it was just by chance, right? It wasn't something I had planned to do. It wasn't in my head. I didn't wake up and say, today I'm going to serve people. It was a way to serve myself initially, that somehow impacted others in that regard. And I don't know if that's the same for everybody or anything, but it was completely, me looking out for myself and looking for a way to improve myself, that ended up being a great way to be a servant leader. Now that I look back on it and reflect on what I've done over this time, it's just been an amazing ride, and it's been a great opportunity to fulfill myself by serving others. So, and I bet if you asked 50 people, Kevin, you're going to get maybe 50 different answers. But for me, but with you starting in that, looking to fulfill yourself, it just happened by chance. It really did. It wasn't a planned thing. It was a way for me to kind of fill a hole in myself, and it just blossomed, I guess, if that makes sense at all.
No, it absolutely does. And what a great segue to the T, the transformation aspect in the still leadership concept I alluded to a moment ago. Before we came on air, you were talking about the enjoyment you get, and you have 3 sons, all involved with athletics, from baseball, basketball, football, etc. The enjoyment you get when they come and ask you to go play catch, it's never a no. And what I sense in your response, and what I sense in knowing you, where your heart's at, where your commitment is you take that opportunity to serve and add value to others. That brings greater value to you, which really becomes a transformation, not only in the lives of the people, such as your children, that you're just taking a few moments out of your day with, and just being a dad, just being there for them, not necessarily being a coach, but it creates transformation in the heart and in the soul. And I'm sure there's been opportunities for you in those moments, maybe not realizing it, where you have grown, and that has helped you in transformation of careers, whether it's moving from education into corporate business industry world as you are now, or whether it's as you advanced in your military career. As you think back on those times that you've moved from maybe level to level, position to position, or from career to career, what stands out the most as far as the obstacles or your ability to succeed and truly make it a transformation, not just a transition movement?
Yeah, so I think, Kevin, I'll probably be an anomaly in this one too, because I think I got to go back further than that. I think, and I don't know that most people have this, and I think we all in general have this aha moment, like, things kind of click and make sense. And I know you've heard this story before, but growing up, we didn't particularly have a lot. My mom left us when I was a very young kid, and my dad took care of us the best he possibly could, but he was a disabled man, as you well know. So we never had much to go. And, the way sports are today, just in general, Jimmy Beasley would not have been able to play a lot of sports growing up if they cost as much as they did, because we just didn't have the money, and there was too many of us to go to do that. So, growing up, I can remember going to school and smelling like bug spray because we had bugs all into our house. And I can remember going to school and smelling like kerosene because we didn't have, our heat was shut off. So we had to open up the oven and have a kerosene heater, which clearly is probably a fire hazard, but it's stuff that, you have to overcome. And, in school, you become the smelly kid and the poor kid, and it matters what you're wearing, and you get bullied for it, and you get pushed around, and you get knocked down, and you get knocked down, and you get knocked down when you do good things, and then you feel good about them, and then you get knocked down. And then, sometimes things happen and change. And we had talked about my oldest son being a small kid, and I was a small kid at his age too. And then I grew an awful lot to be, I grew almost a foot once I matured, and I got to 6 foot. I started playing varsity sports. My face cleared up, things got a little bit better. But then I started looking forward to game days because we could wear suits to school, and then I didn't have to worry about what I was going to wear. Or we could wear our travel suits to school that were part of our practice pack that we could work to have them paid for so I could play sports. So picking what clothes to wear became a non-issue. I can remember my dad sitting on the bed and crying, wondering how he was going to put me in clothes because he's 5'7", 5'8", and I'm 6'1". And he didn't know how he was going to do it anymore. He wears a size 9 and I wear a size 11. Those are just some of the things that kids deal with daily that go unnoticed. And I think it kind of, that time perhaps hardens you a little bit. And I became that bully on the other end of things, right? And I can remember going out, and this is probably the first story that I can remember that has really impacted me as a leader. I can remember walking out to practice, and it was me and my cousin and another guy who was a senior, and he was making fun of my cousin because he was big and said, go get me some water, or he's just being mean to him. And then I'm like, well, who are you? Go get me some water. You're a backup. So I'd become that bully. And I think it was a long time coming, for a couple of years after I had this was my sophomore year, and I'd played later varsity football and basketball, and then things were going well for me in high school. My football coach came up from behind me, and he grabbed me by my shoulder pads and yanked me down. And I thought at this time we were just going through some motions or something, some pre-practice stuff. And he had this bucket of water, and he's mad, and he's got some expletives for me and everything. And he's tired of the person I become. So he says, "Put your hand in the water. Now move it around. Now pull it out." He says, "You see how fast that hole filled up with water? That's how fast you can be replaced on this field and in life and in anything you do. And the minute you forget that is the minute you get passed up. You want to be different, take a look around. Everybody's walking around in this goth clothing. That was the big trend at the time. Or everybody's talking about how they're different and this and that and that. You want to be different. Be a good husband. Be a good father. Be a good man of faith. Be a good person. Try to be the best you can in everything you do. That's how you can set yourself apart." And at that moment, it was just kind of clicked with me, like, man, that makes a whole heck of a lot of sense, right? Like, at any time. So every time in anything I do, I know that there's always somebody right there that wants the job that I want, that wants to have, that maybe is going through a time that I was going through. And if I forget that, then I'm losing out on being the best me. So that's when it started for me. Just that one conversation with that football coach that just really changed my life forever, and it had an impact on me. And I know I've told that story to my teams before, to speaking at in interviews, to speaking to principals, to superintendents, to military leaders, about that transformation. And I don't know that it happens for everybody for like that, but for me, it's just a moment that has really stuck in my mind and really impacted me. And I know that my story has been something that others can use as well. And that football, like you said, maybe somebody that they don't even know, but they're making an impact on others based off of my experience.
And many times those individuals, when they're making that difference, they may never see the difference they made in an individual.
Absolutely.
Taking an educator in the classroom, when that student walks out at the end of the graduation day or at the end of the school year from that grade, they may never get to reap what they've sowed, so to speak, in that regard. So I really appreciate you sharing that. And and I can tell for the audience, I have heard that story before, probably 3 or 4 times. And each time that I hear you tell it, the passion is the same. The aspect of the influence that he made on your life to help that transformation piece. And I think it speaks volumes to the principles and the values that you had sowed in you by your father, and the experiences you mentioned earlier in your life, that at that age you recognize that piece. And that's kind of where the knob got turned a bit with your focus and your commitment for whom Dr. Jimmy Beasley wanted to become.
Absolutely, for sure.
Dr. Beasley, we've covered a lot here in this first segment. I want to ask if you can stick around, because I'd love to continue on leadership and record another segment with you here.
For sure. Yeah.
Absolutely. You are watching Leadership Synergized with Dr. Jimmy Beasley, who's sharing his leadership experiences both from life and professionally. And we're going to come back with another episode with Dr. Beasley coming up in just a matter of weeks.